Welcome to Talking with Fred. I'm Tony.
And I'm Joel.
Why don't you go ahead, pour yourself a cup of coffee or a nice beverage and grab a chair, sit with us as we're talking with Fred today about anger.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of it is groaning with hope.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into it and discuss this little moment about anger.
So what are you angry about, Tony?
Oh, lots of things. We can get angry about politics. We can get angry about religion. We can get angry about our neighbor at the time he mows his lawn, or different things we can be angry about.
Okay. Do you think that's angry?
I think so. Irritants can grow into anger.
Okay. A frustration.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what God talks about?
Some details. I look at Jesus, and when he talks about anger and not sinning in your anger, because he downright got ticked off at the people at the temple.
Does God get angry?
Yeah. The Bible talks about him being angry. David actually made a very good description about God's anger and smoke coming out of his nostrils,
right,
coming down to
2 Samuel 22.
Yeah, and it was kind of it shows that God has emotion.
So what do you think drives anger?
I think passion.
Okay.
To be honest, I think when you're passionate about something and things aren't, I don't want to say going your way.
Do you really think so?
Yeah. I say passion.
Okay.
Passionate about something.
But isn't that more emotional?
Love?
Isn't that more emotional?
Yeah. I think love too.
Mm-hmm.
Love puts us in a moment where we're angry about something. If someone's hurting, so if a bully is hurting my child, I'm going to get angry about that.
So would you say that when Jesus is angry, that it's because he's got his feelings hurt?
I wouldn't say his feelings. Not anything about his feelings personally.
I think that what I'm trying to get at is I think that there's a fundamental difference, and I think it's fundamentally important that we as disciples of Christ see the difference, because we live in a world today that's driven by anger.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's trying to paint the other party as being
the
wrong.
Evil one.
Right? The evil one. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Right? But that's an emotional thing. Right? And it's interesting because we taped this in Copenhagen in Denmark, right? It's so fascinating to see the different cultures, right? In our church,
yeah,
we have a congregation that comes from Nepal. We have a congregation that comes from the Ukraine. We have worked with all different kinds of cultures. We have an African church. We have and a Danish church, right? And so the fascinating thing is to see the difference between the cultures, right?
Yeah.
And you really can see it, for example, as we experience, because we're Americans living in Denmark, right? So we can really look back on our country and see how much emotions drive our culture.
Yeah.
Right? For example, right? If you want someone to do something in America, right? Whether that's a political situation or a religious situation or a financial situation, we have these pep rallies, right? We have a speaker that is really passionate and says something that really emotionally gets us because we want to be motivated to do something.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Motivate me to action. Right? Whereas in the country we live in, it's totally different.
Yeah.
That doesn't fly at all.
You're more reserved here.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is, here, the culture is present your argument, we'll think about it, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. If we
Right?
deem it logical,
Right,
we'll
we will weigh it.
Yeah.
We will look at it.
Yeah.
Right. So we're talking in religious terms, right? And so
Yeah.
in our church, for example, and I see this among guest preachers that come through from different cultures, right? Because what happens in our congregation when someone really makes a good point, everyone goes quiet.
Yeah.
deathly quiet.
Yeah.
That's why you say, well, dames are reserved. Well, yeah, from an outside point of view, it looks that way. From their point of view, no, they're weighing.
Yeah. The
They're
wheels are turning
thinking about
yeah.
what you're saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They don't say amen in the sermon. They don't
Not
get
really.
up and shake
Not
and
over
run
it, yeah.
around and do that stuff because it's not their culture, right? So things are driven passionately.
Yeah.
When I look at the anger that David talks about in 2 Samuel 22 about God's anger, when I look at Jesus' anger in the New Testament, I see something more. I don't see
It's not someone complaining.
his passion of being his feelings hurt. I see the reaction to injustice.
Yeah.
I see the reaction to something that's not righteous, something that's not just,
Yeah.
something that's wrong, right?
Yeah.
In that passage in 2 Samuel, David, those two chapters, 22 and 23, are some of my favorite in the Old Testament because David, in the 22nd chapter, it's his song of the faithfulness of God in his life. That's where we get, he is my refuge.
He's my fortress.
He's my fortress, right? That's the beginning of that chapter. And then he goes on and says, you know, I cried out to you and you heard me, right? Because I was being treated badly, right? I was being treated unjustly.
That's
right?
something to me a lot of people think about. That I'm not being heard.
Right.
So they go
Exactly.
flip side and
Right.
they're complaining.
And so God's
rather than
anger
being-
is moved by that, right? And in Jesus, there's many interpretations of why Jesus drives the merchants out of the temple, out of the courtyards of the temple. But one of the things that had happened over time was that the merchants of the temple were controlled by the priests. And the priest, it basically was their business, right?
Yeah.
And so they began to say, well, you have to offer these animals, right?
buy
And people
from us.
didn't have them, right? So where do you buy them? Well, you buy them at the temple. And so what happened to the price, right? And so basically what Jesus is reacting against is you're making it impossible for people to receive atonement, right? And so he reacts because that's unjust.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we really we look at and we weigh what's going on here. Am I experiencing something that's unjust, or am I just frustrated by something, right? Because I don't like their attitude, or I don't like their
I don't like the
opinion,
way they
or
look, yeah.
I don't like the way they do things, right?
Yeah.
Or are we talking about something that's fundamentally unjust, right? That's the anger God talks about in the Bible. That's what he's really interested in, right? Because that is the point that we become honest with God, right? You can say, I don't like the way you preach, right? I don't like the way you do things, okay?
I like the way you
okay,
preach.
that's fine. That's cool, right? But that's just a frustration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you go to God and you say, I don't like the way he preaches, I don't like the way he does, God's going to say, why?
Yeah.
And then you're going to come to this point about the fact, okay, it's just something, right?
Something that ticks inside of me.
Now, if something was fundamentally wrong,
Yeah.
if somebody has done something against you, right, that's fundamentally wrong, you've been really badly treated,
Yeah.
right, then you have something to tell God.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about, an anger that in faith and in trust begins to tell God about the tribulation, right? What they're going through, right? God, I am angry because
I'm being
I'm
treated
being
unfairly.
treated badly,
Yeah.
right? This is going to cost me my life. This is costing me something.
This isn't just
right?
my feelings being hurt.
Yeah.
And this is not just something that's not going my way.
Exactly.
It's just, this is serious, an issue that's really going to cost my life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is why when they talk about, the anger and they talk about what to do about it, they start talking about the groaning, how would you say it? That really deep talking seriously,
Yeah.
right?
Like people always say, God understands just the moaning.
Right.
When you're in deep
But-
prayer
Yeah.
and your soul is really in pain.
And the reason we
words
do
can't
that
come
is
out.
because we have a hope
Yeah.
that he does hear us, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're in a relationship with your wife, right, and you really get to something that you really think's wrong, that you really think this is really, really something that's bothering me,
Yeah.
you'll get to those quiet points when you talk, when you explain yourself, right? It's as if you kind of go through these different stages, and that is very much dependent on the culture you come from, right? So if you come from a culture that's more attuned to what our cultures are, there's going to be a little screaming and hollering. There's going to be a little in your face. There's going to be, whereas in Denmark they don't do that at all, right? But then when you get past all of that, if you notice, when you really start conversing with someone, you get much quieter, right? You get this is
Well, now,
really
now
something,
you're really feeling that moment of I'm being heard.
right?
And that's where I think a lot of people are stuck, is that when you start getting that loud, that complaining, is that I'm not being heard.
Right.
And I need to be heard, and I need the other person to receive what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
and you're coming in contact
Yeah.
with that pain, right? You're really coming in contact with that you really feel like is wrong, and that you really feel like that you've been treated unjustly, that you've been abandoned, you've been forsaken, you've been whatever, right?
I've been shunned by society.
And so that's that's the groaning, that's the longing, that's the deepness that we can see in our own lives, right? And so sometimes it just helps us to learn our own behavior inside of the cultural context that we live in. How am I reacting? Okay, if I'm reacting, by screaming and hollering, as an American or a Latino or an African American or whatever, and I'm reacting by being loud, okay, maybe that's just a cultural thing. Maybe I need to take it a step more. Maybe I need to think about it a little more. Maybe I need to not just be driven by the emotional side of it, but try to find out, where is the injustice here,
Yeah.
right? If you don't like the way I preach, well, I haven't done any injustice to you. That's just
your own
your
thing.
taste,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you say, then go find someone else,
Yeah.
right? But there's no injustice there,
Yeah.
right? There's no intent.
That's the interesting thing about, like, I've said it before. I like comment sections when it comes to social media. You want entertainment, go to the comment section. And if you really want even more entertainment, just say the opposite of what everybody else is saying,
right.
and you are going to get triggered.
Yeah.
And I mean, like the other day, I'm a wrestling fan, said it before, and I made a comment about a specific wrestler, and about 5 people just weren't thrilled about what I had to say.
Right.
And it was like their feelings got hurt.
Right.
And instead of just coming with an opposing
Right.
argument, they went to belittling me.
Yeah, right.
And that,
Because that's emotional,
yeah,
right? And that's what I'm talking about. That's not anger,
no,
because anger has something
that's
to
just
do
groaning and
with
complaining.
yeah, and anger has something to do with being honest, being honest with yourself, being honest with God, right?
Lie to me,
Because
but don't lie to yourself.
in any situation that
Or was it the other way?
any situation that's unjust,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not, we're involved in it, right? And if you want to go back and look at David, right? We are a part of our lives. Things happen, and there's consequences of things that we do, right? That can be unjust, right? But we're still a part of it, and that's where we really have to be honest with God, right? I talk with a lot of people that struggle with family issues, right? I have one particular that really has a difficult time with his father. And, I totally understand, because it's totally unjust. It's totally wrong, right? The way he's been treated, the way what he's met from his father, the abandonment, the forsaking,
A lot of people,
all of that thing.
really
right?
relate to that. Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, and one thing you have to keep in mind, and I keep telling him, is without your father,
Wouldn't
you're
be
not here.
Yeah.
right? And you want to be
It
here.
sounds repetitive. We say this a lot
Exactly.
because it is important.
Because it's
to know.
so important.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you won. You won the race, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you won.
I was curious about something like that. She asked me questions,
Uh-huh.
and I said she was asking about God. And I know it's a little bit off topic, but kind of driven in that point. Understanding God and why we say He and
Right.
this, and it's not. And this is not getting into the sex talk and all this
No.
because He's a spirit. It's understanding that He is our place of origin.
Right.
I said that's why we say He, because Father means place of origin.
Right.
And that's what we
And
have
so-
to understand.
Exactly. And so, coming to those, honest, that doesn't mean that I have to accept
Yeah.
or confirm or affirm
Yeah.
anything that's been done wrong to me. Mm-hmm. But I just have to realize, hey, life is a gift. Mm-hmm. Maybe your life really stinks. Maybe you're in really difficult situations. Maybe you're in a part of the world that is totally poverty-stricken, right? Yeah, there's some things that are very unjust about that. But we're a part of this world.
Yeah.
And that's the message of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. The message of Jesus Christ is you can't change the world through laws, right?
That's the truth. Yeah.
You have to
You can
change
make
the
a law about
world
everything, but there's
through
nothing you
people.
go- Yeah.
That's his basic message, right? Jesus says, no, it's not the law. It's us.
Mm-hmm.
It's fellowship. Where two or three of you are gathered, I'm in your midst, right? It's about us. God is with us. God is in us. God works through us.
Yeah.
God is our origin. All of these things we talk about it because God is the essence of what we are, and we want to be that friend of God, right? Mm-hmm. That's why Paul, when he argues about these things, he goes back to Abraham, because we want to go back to a time before the law, right? We want to go back to the time when Abraham was a friend of God, because why?
Yeah.
God counted it as righteousness, right? He counted
way of thinking.
Abraham's faith
Yeah.
as being righteous, the right way of thinking, right? And that made him a friend of God. That's Paul's argument. And Jesus says, yeah, we're going to bring you back to that, because that fulfills everything
back,
God
yeah.
wanted to do with the law, right? And it brings us to a place above and beyond and bigger and more fantastic
Yeah.
than just some rules.
Like he said in Revelations 2, come back to your first love.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so many
Not
times.
relationships, by the way. I'm not talking about leaving your wife and
No,
going
no,
back
no,
to the
no.
first girlfriend.
No.
I mean, Jesus as our first love.
But you just see this so many times. The fundamental things we believe in
Yeah.
is the righteousness between two people, between us, between our fellowship, between our community.
Yeah.
We don't like to think about that because we want someone else to solve everything, right?
Yeah.
We want our governments to solve it. We want our national banks to solve it. We want the hospital to solve it.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it all starts with us.
It's funny. A friend of mine, and I promised I'd mention her. I won't mention by name, but anyways, it's my shout out to you. I was pointing out something on social media that had to do with injustice.
Right.
And so she came to me in a private message when we were talking about it. And she said, brilliantly pointed it out, the obvious, is that change starts at the table.
Absolutely.
The first place, it has to start at the table. You teach your children in the way he should be raised, and in the end, he won't depart.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can complain and complain and complain about my father, or I can turn around and decide I'm going to be a good father.
Yeah.
It's going to stop here. I'm going to change it. That's the hope. Right?
And going back to that was what we talked about in the Ten Commandments. You can see that
Right.
with honoring your mother and
Mother
your
and
father.
father.
They laid out a foundation for you just
You're
by
here
being
because of
born.
them.
Precisely. And once you build on that, you're doing something
But that's
great.
just your beginning.
Yeah.
And don't let that
Yeah.
determine
Your end.
your end,
Yeah.
right? And
Your present and your
you
future.
honor them in God's sight by going on, not by becoming lower, but by building, going on, changing things, right? becoming something that your children will look at differently.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we all looked at the world that way, the world would be a very different place.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. We groan about, we suffer under the consequences of these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have a hope. And that hope is we can actually do something with it.
Yeah.
And so the anger drives us to change something that's unjust, something that's unrighteous, something that's wrong, to something that's good.
So why does Jesus say, don't sin in your anger? Where is he going with that when he's telling people don't sin?
Well, because I think that in that time of honesty, you know, we can be driven. I mean, we can have a long discussion about this, but
Right. Well,
and it's everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
But my opinion is, be careful not to be driven by the passion or the emotion.
because it can lead
Get to the honesty
Yeah.
of the anger.
So this is where people end up.
Right.
Instead, this is that ego that
Because
comes out and you
remember,
start murdering
sin.
or-
Right. Remember,
Yeah.
sin is what hinders you
Yeah.
in coming closer to God. Right. It's not one thing as bad as something else. It's simply whatever hinders you in coming closer to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesus says, you know, don't let these processes end in the emotional side of it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why we started out by challenging, yeah, but what is it?
Yeah.
Right? Because most people is going to describe it in terms of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the problem with emotion is, what do we call it? A crime of passion. Right?
Yeah.
We don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
We want to come down to the honesty of the injustice, the honesty of anger. Where's it coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Because then we can do something about it.
Your father once said something to me that just always stuck in my head and will always be there for the rest of my life. He said, stop thinking with your heart. God gave you a brain for a reason.
Yeah, right.
Use your head.
Right, and it's that balance, right? That you've got your intellect, right, and then you have your emotions, right? And in biblical terms, that's your stomach, right? I mean, we get butterflies, we get,
Yeah.
we get,
When test time comes around.
exactly. Where do you feel it? You feel it in your stomach. So from time
go
immemorial, we have talked about emotions. The seat of emotions are in our stomach, in our gut, right? Well, what's halfway in between? Your
right.
heart,
Yeah.
because your heart connects it all,
Yeah.
right? Your heart is the center that connects it all, right? That does not mean that we should begin to think in those areas. We need to think with our brains,
Yeah.
right? And we need to have emotions.
Yeah.
But we need the heart to balance it.
This is
Right.
this is my Star Trek reference where Spock and the Vulcans had that right mentality of thinking logically
Yeah, right.
about things, not let the emotion drive you.
Right. And then have the heart to not become legalistic.
Yeah.
Because that's what logic will always do.
Yeah.
Pure intellect will want a law,
Yeah.
right? That's what it's
You
going
need
to
that
want.
balance.
This is right, so everybody has to
Yeah.
adhere it, right? And that's where you have to have a heart to balance things, because we can't live without emotion. When
Yeah.
God breathed life into us,
He gave us emotion.
that's what made us know we were alive, right? Because we can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need that, and we need the intellect. But one can
Cannot
never dominate the
outweigh the
other.
other, yeah.
And if that happens, then you're in problem, right? So Jesus talks about balance.
Yeah.
He talks about bringing, the balance back into life, the harmony back into life, those things that make it easy. And when you get to the honesty of
That's
the
why I
issue.
love that scripture where he says, there is a time to be happy. There is a
Right.
time of war. There is a time
Right.
of anger. There's always a balance. There's some time for every little thing.
Exactly. So come to the honesty with yourself and the honesty with God. Come to the honesty of what it is that you think is unjust. And the interesting thing about that is it can only be personal, right? I mean, I can look at something and say, I think that's wrong that somebody else is being, but I'm being motivated by the way I think, by the way I feel, by the way I
Well, your
experience,
upbringing,
right?
yeah, your upbringing
Right?
is
So you can have one person in a difficult situation where one person thinks horrible, the other person doesn't even react, right? I've seen this a multitude of times in different parts of the world, right? So we have to be careful with all this. We have to be serious, because when it really comes down to it, it's a personal thing, right? Look into your heart what is driving, what's the issue? Let me handle that issue. Let me be honest with myself, right? Let me be honest with God, and let me really go through that process, right? And that is a grieving process. That is a process of moaning, of groaning, of really getting it out of your system, right? In a hope
Yeah.
that we can change it, right? So if I don't go through that stage, if I don't really have someone I can talk to and complain about, right? If I don't have God that I can tell about, if I can't get it out of my system, but I have to do that.
Yeah.
But I do that in the hope that I'm going to change this.
Yeah.
Not in this idea I'm going to stay here.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I was saying if all you're doing is just complaining,
Exactly.
then you're not going anywhere.
You're not
You're just
going anywhere.
staring at the thing going, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid.
And we're all in agreement.
But what are you
But what
going
are you
to
going to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you going to produce another generation
Yeah.
that abandons their children, that forsakes their children, that treats their children badly? Or are you going to be the one that grieves about it, moans about it, is honest with yourself about it? First of all, this is what this went on in our family, and it's wrong. And I'm a part of this family. I'm a result of this family.
I had a deadbeat
but I'm also
dad, but I'm not going to be the
exactly.
deadbeat
But
dad.
I'm also the answer to this family.
Yeah.
And I wish, especially among men, that we had more men that would rise up and say, no, I'm the solution to this. We're not going to do this anymore. In my house, we're going to serve God.
And yes, I know what you're thinking because I'm thinking the same thing. It is difficult sometimes because when you have a group, a collective mind, that the poor man's mentality, this is who we were, this is who we are, this is who we're always going to be. How dare you try and change that? I can't make it, so why do you think you're the special one? And I think that's a very difficult thing when people really just want to beat their heads against the wall. And
Change
stay.
is never easy.
No.
That's what they say about change, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to talk about change.
But
The
they don't
problem
wanna
is
do it.
nobody wants to do anything differently,
Right.
right? The fact that you rise up and say, I'm going to do things differently.
It's going to be met
Cost
with,
whatever it costs.
Yeah.
I'm going to do things differently,
Yeah.
right? Because I've been honest with myself. I've been honest with God. And notice that we're honest with ourselves. We're honest with God. We're not honest with other people,
That's true.
right?
That's why there's filters on social media.
I've been honest with myself.
Yeah.
I cannot live with this anymore, right? I'm not trying to get anybody else's confirmation or affirmation or anything.
That's where a lot of the problems are. Yeah.
Cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
The pain that I have felt, what I have gone on, I do not want to go further.
Yeah.
Right? That's my own thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take a position on right or wrong or anything. This is who I am. This is what I've experienced. This is how it's reacted. I'm not going to sin in my anger and in my frustration and in my passion.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going to be honest with God, and I'm going to change things.
So would you say that part of sinning in anger would be basically, this is a situation that's around me and I give up and I'm just going to stay the status quo?
Yeah, I think you're right. And
Would
I
that
think
be-
the point about staying in it,
Yeah.
I think would be that keeps you from God.
Because, I mean, you have to answer. You
Because-
have to answer to God at one point.
Right,
And,
and-
so when you're standing before God and he says, I've given you all this opportunity, what do you have to say about
Right.
this?
Because God moves forward. He's always moving
Yeah.
forward, right?
Yeah.
And so God always expects us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
He always expects us to go. So if we're staying in something,
Yeah.
then that's a sin. That's holding us from God, right? So
if you don't change the direction
distance,
you're going,
right?
you're going to end up where
Right.
you are.
The distance grows.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of ways of looking at that. I would say don't sin because you don't want to be motivated by emotion.
Right.
I would say don't sin because you don't want to stay.
Yeah.
You can be so honest with yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then throw yourself a pity party,
True.
right? You want to be honest with yourself. You want to be honest with God because
Yeah.
when you're honest with yourself, you come in contact with what you think is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're honest with God, God says, okay,
Now what are you going to do?
now let's go.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you gonna
I'm
pick
going
up
to
and
give
go?
you healing.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you restoration.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you hope. I'm going to give you grace.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you strength. I'm going to give you power. Now let's go.
I think that was thinking like with Matthew when he was calling the disciples. Jesus just said, "Come," and they just picked up and left. I mean, it was just a simple word. And I think too, I was just thinking about marriage, and this goes a little bit darker in people in abusive relationships. You can make excuses for what your spouse is doing, or,
Right.
it's not that I condone divorce, but there comes a point
Well,
where
I do sometimes.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is sometimes there's a point where you have to say,
Absolutely.
"I'm sorry."
Absolutely.
He or she is not living up
But that's
to
being
what
honest
God,
with yourself.
Yeah, precisely. He
Right.
or she is not living up to what God set
Right.
forth of what marriage is. They're not holding their end of the
And
bargain
and
up,
these are-
and
these
you
are-
have the right to leave.
Obviously, very difficult situations and,
Yeah.
and difficult topics, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, you have to become honest with yourself
Yeah.
in an abusive relation, whether you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you have to fundamentally come to the point and ask yourself, why did I do this?
Yeah,
What was it that attracted me to all this in the
Yeah.
beginning? I mean, I've asked that question to countless people, right? I mean, why did you marry that deadbeat in the first place,
Yeah.
right? Some of those things, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm just saying, getting honest with yourself,
Yeah.
then you can say, yeah, God, I'm a sinner, forgive me,
yeah,
right? I need your grace. I need your mercy. Because my grief, my prayer, my hurt is coming from a place of hope
Yeah.
that you will forgive me. And so I have to what? I have to repent,
yeah.
right? God, forgive me, for I am a sinner.
For those who are asking, what is repentance?
It's just that. It's
It means-
it's the acknowledgement
Uh-huh.
that we as humans have fallen in sin.
So basically, you're saying, make a 180.
Exactly.
And go the
Repent,
opposite
That's what it
direction.
means,
Yeah.
right? God, please forgive me. I'm going
Let's
to rise
move
up. I'm going to go a different direction, right?
Yeah.
And maybe, there's consequences of that, but God understands that.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't want you to stay in a bad situation, especially if you're being abused, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or physically.
I think
that's not
where,
right.
I think that's where a lot of people fail to realize is that there is repentance. God will forgive, but there are times you have to understand that you have to deal with the consequences of the choices you make.
Just don't go out and do it again
yeah, yeah.
and come to me as your pastor, because then you're going to get it, right? And you know that.
If you're watching this, just so you know, he's not kind. He isn't.
I am kind,
He's not kind.
but I'm not going. Don't.
When I was trying to get some math in my head, he stood over the table, making me extremely nervous. And I asked, "Could you please move?" And he said, "No."
Learn it. But no, I mean, that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will do the same thing again.
Yeah.
That's not change.
I remember there's a pastor friend of mine from Vero, and he was talking about a guy who was just addicted to having sex, and the consequences caught up, and he
Right.
caught AIDS.
Right.
And when he came back to our mutual friend, he said, "I'm trying to ask God to forgive me." And I mean, God will forgive you. You can turn around. You can start living a better life. But in reality, you have to deal with this consequence. God may heal you. God may not heal the sickness. And that's what I mean by God may heal you. He may heal the sickness, but he may not. You might have to just deal with that. But the restoration of the mind.
Well, that's a difficult. I mean,
It's not to go farther out, but
the difficult thing in
Yeah.
that is accepting the fact
yeah,
that God may allow you to die to save you from not being able
yeah,
to quit.
yeah,
Right? We don't know those things.
yeah. Those
Things are in
different-
God's hands,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
But sometimes we get to well, God didn't heal me because he doesn't love me or it's not right or whatever. But perhaps he saves you from something else. Let's don't get into that.
yeah. No, I agree. But it was just
those
part of that.
things
It's part of that mentality.
You have to become
Yeah.
honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And so I think if we sum it all up, be observant and be honest with yourself is
Yeah.
what anger is,
Yeah.
right?
I'm here because of these
What is
situations.
the injustice?
But what can I do to move forward?
Yeah. What is the
Yeah.
injustice? And that's what's in the injustice in me,
Yeah.
in my life, right?
Yeah.
Not what I think about,
Yeah.
somebody else.
Johnny down
This
the street.
is what
yeah.
I am experiencing.
Yeah.
This is the injustice in it. This is the unrighteousness in
Yeah.
it. God, I'm being honest with myself. I'm being honest with you. Now,
Yeah.
you know,
Johnny and
atone my sins,
Yeah.
restore me,
Yeah.
and let me come on.
Yeah. That's the main part, is understanding that Johnny down the street, Joni, they may have hard heads, but at our table, we can teach your children, we can teach our future to go move forward in something else and say, that is an injustice in our world, but we're not going to let that
Yeah.
dictate how we're going to be
So
raising.
honesty helps with the hurt,
Yeah.
right? Honesty is what's going to move you in your hurt,
Yeah.
right? But it's God's grace and God's hope
Yeah.
that's going to bring change.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Listen, we're talking about lives that are changed
Yeah.
by the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't let your ego get in the way either.
Exactly. So you can go through all of what you have to go through, but always remember, Jesus, you are changing me into the likeness of my Father, into the likeness of who you are.
Yeah.
And that demands that we do things differently.
And when he's talking about Father, just remember, we're not talking about the physical
No, you're
man.
talking about your Father.
The Heavenly Father. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to remember, that place of origin. God is a righteous God. He's going to give us something, hope, which was Jesus Christ on the cross.
Right.
He gave us hope.
Yeah.
And so don't let that slip away. It's never too late to start changing and letting God bring you out of this situation. Let that righteous anger come in and change the situation around you. So if you like this and you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Leave your comments in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you, what you think, what you guys have to say, because this is conversational. You can follow us on Facebook. We'll upload podcasts if you're listening to this on audio. And always check us out on Instagram and TikTok. We like to put little videos up and everything at Talking with Fred. And we look forward to hearing you next time. God bless.